Okay, so in this video I'll be explaining the descending tracts of the spinal cord that are found in the white matter of the spinal cord. So we already know that we have ascending and descending tracts. The ascending tracts are the sensory ones, which carry information from the outer environment to the human brain. Descending tracts, from their name, they are descending. They go from up to down, which means that we're carrying information from the brain to the periphery. This is the motor output. The things that we want to do, the things that we want to control. Anyways, so the tracts of the spinal cord, as a quick introduction, they're divided to three types: pyramidal, extrapyramidal, and lastly autonomic. Okay, so the pyramidal and extrapyramidal, they control skeletal muscles. However, the autonomic controls the viscera and the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. Now we will focus now on the pyramidal and extrapyramidal parts of the descending tracts of the spinal cord. So the pyramidal tract is voluntary, so it helps us voluntarily control our muscles. However, the extrapyramidal is involuntary, and the way I remember it is that we add something extra, like involuntary extrapyramidal, you know. For this video, I will be focusing on the pyramidal tract, okay? So I'm gonna move this out of the way a bit, okay? So that we can draw a quick mind map for the pyramidal tract. Now I'm going to give a quick overview about the pyramidal tracts, and then they won't make much sense at first, but then later on they will. Now for the pyramidal tracts, again, there are two types. So let's call the first type type 1A, since pyramidal is number 1 over here, and it is known as the corticonuclear tract. Okay, and then we have 1B, and this is the corticospinal tract. All right, so two types of voluntary control: corticonuclear and corticospinal. The corticospinal tract is further subdivided into an anterior division, okay, and a lateral division. تمام. So the anterior division represents like 8% of the corticospinal tracts. The lateral represents 92%. Okay, so 8 plus 92 equals 100 of the corticospinal. The corticonuclear is something else. Okay, so this 8%, it's very important to remember that this 8% is direct. It does not decussate. It is ipsilateral. The 90% bit, it does decussate, so it's contralateral. Okay. The 2%, it is direct, all right, and it is ipsilateral. Okay, so 2% is ipsilateral, 8% is ipsilateral, and the 90% is contralateral, and these percents are all from the 100% of the corticospinal tract, which is one of the two types of the pyramidal tracts that help us voluntarily control our muscles. Okay, I know this all sounds so confusing, but now when we get into the actual stuff, they will make much better sense. Okay, so let's get everything back into place as it was, and let's start talking about the pyramidal tracts. So as we have mentioned, the pyramidal tracts are of two types. The first type is the corticonuclear fibers, the CN, which, as we mentioned قبل شوي, we called it as the 1A. The corticospinal fibers, let's call them as 1B, and then they were further divided to lateral and anterior divisions. So let's now start talking about the corticonuclear fibers. Now, one thing we notice from the three types, they all start with cortico, all right? Which means that the first order neuron, or the upper motor neuron, is starting from the cerebral cortex, all right? So all pyramidal fibers, all pyramidal tracts start from the cerebral cortex. Now let's zoom in and talk about the corticonuclear fibers, and let's start drawing, okay? So corticonuclear. As you can see, I have written over here the color code for the nerves. So we said that corticonuclear starts with cortico, which means that our first neuron nucleus is found in the cerebral cortex. All right. So this is the first order neuron. Now, before I start explaining the course of this tract, I would like to give a brief introduction or a brief explanation about the cranial nerves. So the cranial nerves are part of the peripheral nervous system, just like the spinal nerves. However, they are arising from the head, hence the cranial, and they arise specifically from the brainstem. They are a group of cranial nerves, and then they go to their target organs. Okay, we still haven't taken them yet, I know, but that's basically it. They are nerves from the peripheral nervous system arising from the brainstem. Anyways, so their nuclei are present in the brainstem, and then their axons go to their target organs. Now let's get back to our upper motor neurons. So we said corticonuclear. So the first order neuron is arising from the cerebral cortex. It goes down all the way to the brainstem, and then it synapses with these cranial nerves in the brainstem. Okay? So cortico from the cerebral cortex, the upper motor neuron, and then corticonuclear to the nuclei of the cranial nerves that are found in the brain stem. So this is the corticonuclear tract, simply. Of course, as you can see, it decussates, as we have mentioned previously. So there is decussation, and we expect lesions to be contralateral if they happen in this area, for example. Now, the rest of these fibers that are arising from the cerebral cortex, they're going to go down, and then they're going to continue going to all the different places, and they're going to form the corticospinal tracts. So corticonuclear, because here we are synapsing with the cranial nerves. Corticospinal are the other two, and it's called as corticospinal, or it is known as corticospinal because it arises from the cerebral cortex. So cortex, cortico, and then it goes down towards the spinal cord, hence the corticospinal tract, the name. Now, I will end this video here. We know what is corticonuclear, and then in the next video I'll be explaining the corticospinal tracts, the anterior and the lateral ones.